Honorable Chair, distinguished members of the panel, retired chiefs, ladies and gentlemen, other veterans and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about TOT and how do we make that a win-win in India. My credentials to talk about TOT is that I'm currently the country head for Lockheed Martin. So I'll just start off by telling you all the amount of TOT that Lockheed Martin has placed into India and how it has been a win-win for both for Lockheed Martin as well as our partner in India. Lockheed Martin and Ashok Leyland jointly developed a next-generation military vehicle for both Indian customers and the global market. The design and technical support was provided by Lockheed Martin engineering team for developing the vehicle, customized to the requirement of the Indian Army. The vehicle has been field evaluated in various environmental conditions by the Indian customers and now is in use by one of them. I will now come to our most prestigious JVs, both TLMOL and TSAL. TLMOL is Tata Lockheed Martin Aerostructures Limited and TSAL is Tata Sikorsky. Both these JVs started off sometime in 2010, that's almost 14 years ago, possibly a little more than 14 years ago. TSAL started off first a little earlier as compared to TLMOL. And TSAL was manufacturing the cabins for the S-92 helicopter. The S-92 helicopter, for those of you all who don't know, is the same helicopter that is the Marine One. It is the VVIP helicopter for the US President. And so you can imagine the amount of importance that was given to an Indo-US JV to manufacture something as important as that here in India. TLMOL had started off with manufacturing the empennages for the C-130, the entire vertical fin, the stabilizer as well as part of the rear fuselage, and that too started off sometime in 2010. Currently, when it started off in 2010, it had 0 IC. Just to go to Rajiv's point and give you all a better picture of IC and how it works for a foreign OEM. When we started manufacturing the empennages in 2010, it was 0 IC. There was nothing that was made in India. Everything came from abroad. Today, after 14 years, we have 94% IC when you count the items, and 74% IC when you count it in terms of value. The main problem is that India does not make the material that is required for that. And that is another point we come to, and when you say we'll get you 100% IC, we'll increase the IC, should the parts or components or materials that are not made in India be counted as part of IC? That's moot. But we'll come to that later. So I do not see any FOEM coming into India from the word go and saying that I'll give you an IC that's a very high number. He could do that, but the cost would go up considerably. We have to give it has to be incremental, it has to take its time to build up, and build up it surely will, as we have seen from both the empennages that we make in TLMOL, and more recently we put in the F-16 wings, which we are making in the same JV with Tata's. So with the 500 suppliers that we have built in our country for the JVs, when we started off with the F-16, we already had 74% IC from the word go. And that is why I say that India needs to look, there were many people in the beginning also who said, Atmanirbharta, I think it was the chief who said, we can't look at Atmanirbharta tomorrow. It has to be something that is incremental. It is something that will take its time, but it will surely deliver. The F-16 is definitely high-tech. It is definitely TOT. It's a 9G wing. It's fluid carrying. It does not have bladders inside that wing. It is actually metal. The wing itself is carrying fuel. And as Air Chief Marshal Brown said in the morning, it is interchangeable. There are very few parts that are interchangeable on an aircraft, and this requires tremendous amount of manufacturing skill, gauge control tooling, procedures and things like that. When we talk about TOT, it's not about putting a part or a piece or part of equipment into the country. It's just the processes. The processes are as important as the part itself. Very often, like just to give you all an idea of the F-16 wing, we put up the jigs for the F-16 wing just prior to COVID, and COVID hit. There was a requirement for them to turn off the ACs in the JV, and they did that. And 1 week later, when they came back, the jigs were all out of sort. So that's the kind of quality assurance that is required, especially for fighters. Quality assurance is different for fighters, it's different for transports, and it's different for other manufacturing items. So the F-16 is definitely TOT. If I was to mark out what are the challenges that people would face in putting TOT into India, one would be the regulatory hurdles. There are diverse regulations and compliance requirements that are required to be met by various countries. Even when we do want to put in, let's suppose there was a time when you could put in TOT and count it against your offsets. But how do you measure that TOT? That TOT, would it get the right valuation? Who's going to decide what is the value of the TOT? So there are regulatory constraints that are put up by different countries and make it difficult for you to put in TOT so easily. Next, that's covered by Rajiv, is IP rights. How safe would a foreign OEM consider himself to let go of certain TOT? And this is where choosing a trusted partner matters most. The partner, Lockheed Martin has been with a single partner for almost 14 years, and I think we'll be going forward much further with that, and that's why there's a large amount of trust that needs to be developed between the partners when you talk about TOT. Skill gaps. Anybody coming in to put in work and transfer technology is always worried this country would be able to cope up with the skill that is required to deliver the goods, because it's going to impact his bottom line, it's his revenues, his finances. So just to cover, Tata's has got an excellent setup for training. It's called the Gurukul system, and it trains people on the shop floor. They churn out almost 800 people a year, which feed their different JVs, and the training is absolutely world class. The skill level of people who are working, especially this I can state because I heard it myself, that there was an FSR, an overseer from Lockheed Martin who had come to see the manufacture of the prototype. And he was watching somebody doing the sealing of the F-16 wing. And the guy was doing it was less than 35 years old. And he says, this chap has got lesser age than I have service, but I can tell you that he's doing a better job than I am. Okay, so that's the kind of skill that has been developed by Tata's, and that's the skill that possibly India can provide us if we really look at it. There is funding and investment. Both partners should be equally willing to put in as much money as required. Political and economic stability matters a lot, and finally the geopolitics and whether there is political harmony between the two countries matter a lot. If we were to see if this would be mutually beneficial, and since I'm talking about a win-win, I think to make it, I think there are some aspects that we have to consider if we want to make it win-win. One is to prefer a JV setup. A joint venture will always foster partnerships which would prevent disputes. A JV would share risks. They would share investment costs, profits, and thereby enhance collaboration and commitment. The other thing is, do both the partners look at it as capacity building? There should be some requirement for the person who's moving TOT to have some benefit from putting it into the country. Would you get capacity building by doing that? And for the same reason, the example that I would go to is the empennage, which is sole source. It is only manufactured in India, And every C-130 that is flying, which is coming out today from Marietta, has a empennage from Adibatla and Hyderabad. So that's the capacity that has been built up for both. Then is localization. How much of work have we put into India? And that we've seen, we've already got about 500 suppliers who are feeding into the JVs. And the last one is, if it has to be win-win, it has to be a long-term relationship. You can't keep jumping partners and making sure that all of them live up to expectations, especially once you have a partner that's reliable and trustworthy, you will stick to it, and it works both ways. So somebody was, very often we talk about TOT being put into a country and things like that. I would wonder who of us, who of us would actually buy a house for 1.2 crores, furnish it, and then tell somebody else, come stay in that, don't pay me rent, I'll live somewhere else. There are billions of dollars that are spent on technology. And it would be very, very naive of us to think that somebody would come and place TOT into a country without any returns. Having said that, in today's world, everybody wants Atmanirbhar. It's not only India who wants Atmanirbhar. Korea will want it, Saudi Arabia will want it. Everybody who buys a platform from anyone would be looking for some amount of work to be put into that country. How difficult then does it become for someone to just decide to put work into India? I'll be very frank, whether Lockheed Martin put in the empennages without any compulsion. It was a decision taken at the highest level to include Mr. Ratan Tata, and it was put in without any compulsion. The F-16 wing work has been put into India without any compulsion. There's no forcing of us. There's no requirement that has arisen for us to put that work. And so also with the cabins. So that's about Atmanirbhar, and how difficult would it be for a foreign OEM to come and offer TOT just like that. The other part that I want to say is that we are talking about building up an ecosystem that will support the growth of the defense sector. The GCAP is expected to cost, just the development of the GCAP is supposed to cost $50 billion. We heard them talking about the R&D budget going from 5% to about 15% in the next 10 years. By 10 years, even the GCAP may be an old aircraft. We, starting today, are still working on a 5th gen aircraft. It's not yet in production. If we are going to wait for our monies to come to set up R&D that is 10 years down the line, we'll be too late if we are going to start with what technology we have today. We have to look at some bridge between what technology we have currently, start R&D for 15, 20 years from now, fund it, but use something to leapfrog between this time and that time for our ecosystem. How we do that, we have many people to think about it, and I think we do need to lean a lot on what could be offered to us by what is available in the world today. The last part that I want to say is that when we talk about TOT, I want to bring up about the MRO that we have just announced. Lockheed Martin has just announced along with Tata's. The MRO holds about 65% of the cost of any platform. It is not so much the cost of manufacturing that platform in its entire life cycle is about 35%. The main amount of money comes from the MRO, and that is what Lockheed Martin is the first, it's going to be the first defense MRO company servicing our C-130s in country along with our trusted partner Tata's. And that's where TOT comes in. It brings in a lot. And more than TOT, we were hearing about, I heard Rajiv talking about, foreign OEMs being looked at as an Indian company if we put in 100% FDI and things like that. Even if you put in 100% FDI, you're not looked at as an Indian company. You're not allowed to bid for Make 1, Make 2. So How do we get over it? And this is my personal opinion. Many foreign companies come and put in a large amount of money here. What does it take them, if you're looking at 100% FDI, bring in even more amount of money? What does it make that company to be looked at as an Indian company? Is it just that he has 50% of his holdings by an Indian citizen? That's very difficult, because then, you'll continue waiting for somebody to actually come in. If your idea is to bring money into the country, if your idea is to generate an ecosystem, if your idea is to generate employment, if your idea is to generate revenue, then let's have those metrics to identify a company as Indian. You have invested so many $1 million. You are generating so many million of dollars. You are exporting so much of money. You are employing so many employees. If you hit these benchmarks, if you hit these metrics, should you be considered an Indian company? That's a thought that I'd like to leave you all before I end. Thank you.